The Catcher in the Rye by J. D. Salinger is one of the most influential and controversial novels ever written about adolescence, identity, alienation, mental health, and the painful transition from childhood into adulthood. Published in 1951, the novel follows a few days in the life of Holden Caulfield, a troubled teenage boy wandering through New York City after being expelled from school. At first glance, the book may appear simple, because much of it consists of Holden talking casually about people, places, memories, and experiences. But beneath his sarcastic voice lies deep emotional pain, loneliness, confusion, grief, fear, and a desperate search for authenticity in a world he perceives as fake. The novel became famous because Holden feels psychologically real. He is not presented as a heroic or polished protagonist. He is contradictory, immature, intelligent, judgmental, sensitive, funny, vulnerable, and deeply wounded all at once. One of the novel's central themes is alienation. Holden constantly feels disconnected from the people around him. He struggles to fit into schools, social environments, and expectations imposed by adults. He observes society critically and becomes disgusted by what he repeatedly calls phoniness. For Holden, phoniness means artificial behavior, hypocrisy, superficiality, social performance, and dishonesty. He sees adults pretending constantly, pretending to care, pretending to be sophisticated, pretending to be successful, pretending to be moral, pretending to be happy. This sensitivity to insincerity isolates him because he struggles to trust people fully. Yet Salinger also shows that Holden's judgment of others sometimes protects him emotionally. If everyone is fake, then emotional closeness becomes less necessary and less risky. Another major theme is the fear of growing up. Holden does not simply dislike adulthood. He fears what adulthood represents: loss of innocence, corruption, responsibility, sexual complexity, compromise, disappointment. He romanticizes childhood because children seem more honest, spontaneous, emotionally pure, and authentic. This idea becomes most visible in the novel's most famous symbol, the Catcher in the Rye. Holden imagines children playing in a field near a dangerous cliff. He pictures himself standing near the edge, catching them before they fall. Symbolically, the cliff represents adulthood and the painful loss of innocence. Holden wants to preserve childhood innocence forever, protecting children from the suffering, hypocrisy, and confusion he associates with adult life. This fantasy reveals both his compassion and his emotional inability to accept change. Another major theme is grief. Much of Holden's emotional instability connects to the death of his younger brother Ali, who died of leukemia years earlier. Ali represents innocence, kindness, love, and purity in Holden's memory. Holden never fully processed this loss. Instead, grief remains frozen inside him. He speaks about Ali with extraordinary tenderness and emotional intensity, revealing how deeply the loss damaged him psychologically. Many of Holden's behaviors, anger, isolation, impulsiveness, depression, emotional confusion, can be understood partly as unresolved grief. Salinger subtly shows how trauma affects identity. Holden often acts emotionally detached, but beneath his sarcasm is profound sadness. Another important theme is loneliness. Throughout the novel, Holden constantly seeks connection while simultaneously sabotaging it. He calls people impulsively. He starts conversations with strangers. He visits bars, hotels, clubs, and old acquaintances. Yet even when interacting with others, he rarely feels understood. This creates one of the novel's most painful patterns. Holden desperately wants closeness, but fears vulnerability. This contradiction feels deeply human. Many people crave connection while also fearing rejection, disappointment, or exposure. Another central theme is mental health. Although the novel never diagnoses Holden directly, it strongly suggests emotional instability, depression, anxiety, trauma, and psychological exhaustion. His narration jumps unpredictably. He struggles sleeping. He feels emotionally numb at times. He becomes overwhelmed by intrusive thoughts. He frequently lies impulsively. He experiences emotional extremes. Importantly, Salinger does not portray mental suffering as dramatic spectacle. Instead, it appears quietly through behavior, thought patterns, and emotional confusion. This realism contributes to the novel's lasting power. Holden's relationship with his younger sister Phoebe is especially important. Phoebe represents intelligence, innocence, emotional honesty, and unconditional love. Unlike many others, she understands Holden more deeply. When Holden interacts with Phoebe, readers see his genuine tenderness beneath the cynicism. He protects her emotionally and admires her authenticity. Phoebe also challenges Holden by confronting his negativity and lack of direction. One of the novel's most emotional moments occurs when Holden realizes Phoebe wants to run away with him. This forces him to recognize the consequences of his emotional instability. Another major theme is identity. Holden constantly struggles to define himself. He rejects social expectations but lacks a clear alternative vision for life. He criticizes institutions but feels lost without them. He wants authenticity, yet often behaves dishonestly himself. This contradiction is intentional. Adolescence frequently involves confusion between who you are, who society expects you to become, and who you fear becoming. Holden exists painfully inside this uncertainty. The novel also critiques institutions. Schools in the novel often prioritize appearance, status, and conformity more than genuine understanding. Adults frequently appear disconnected, performative, or emotionally unavailable. Yet Salinger avoids simplistic rebellion narratives. Holden is not always correct in his judgments. Sometimes his criticism reveals insight. Other times it reflects immaturity, fear, or projection. This complexity makes the novel psychologically rich. Another important theme is sexuality and emotional confusion. Holden feels both curious about and frightened by adult sexuality. He associates sex with corruption, manipulation, or emotional danger. His encounters with women often reveal insecurity rather than confidence. This reflects his broader fear of adulthood itself. Growing up means confronting emotional and physical realities he feels unprepared to handle. Another powerful theme is authenticity. Holden desperately searches for something emotionally real in a world that feels artificial. Small moments affect him deeply because they feel genuine. Children singing, simple conversations, honest kindness, memories of Allie, Phoebe riding the carousel. These moments matter because they cut through cynicism temporarily. Salinger suggests authenticity may exist not in perfection, but in vulnerability and presence. Another major lesson concerns innocence. Holden idealizes innocence, but the novel gradually reveals that innocence cannot remain untouched forever. Change is unavoidable. Children grow up. People suffer. Life becomes complicated. The challenge is not preserving innocence forever, but learning how to move through adulthood without losing humanity completely. This becomes especially symbolic in the carousel scene near the end of the novel. Holden watches Phoebe ride the carousel in the rain and realizes children must sometimes reach for the gold ring themselves, even if falling is possible. This moment suggests a subtle emotional breakthrough. Protection cannot prevent all pain. Growth requires risk. People must live their own lives. This realization represents partial acceptance of change. Another important theme is communication failure. Many characters talk without truly understanding one another. Holden often hides his real emotions beneath sarcasm or humor. This emotional masking contributes to his isolation. Salinger shows how difficult honest communication can become when people fear judgment or vulnerability. The novel also explores privilege and dissatisfaction. Holden comes from a relatively wealthy background, yet remains deeply unhappy. This challenges the assumption that material comfort guarantees emotional well-being. Psychological suffering crosses social class boundaries. Another major reason the novel remains influential is its narrative voice. Holden speaks directly, casually, emotionally, and imperfectly. His voice feels intimate and immediate, almost like listening to someone trying to understand themselves in real time. Readers often connect strongly with Holden because he expresses emotions many people experience, but rarely articulate openly. Confusion, loneliness, disillusionment. Fear of change, desire for authenticity, emotional exhaustion. The novel does not offer easy solutions. Holden does not suddenly become healthy, successful, or fully healed. Instead, Salinger presents emotional struggle honestly. Healing appears gradual, uncertain, and incomplete. How can someone apply the lessons of The Catcher in the Rye today? First, recognize the emotional importance of authenticity. Second, understand that cynicism can sometimes hide vulnerability and pain. Third, acknowledge grief rather than suppressing it. Fourth, remember that loneliness often exists even in crowded environments. Fifth, approach people with empathy rather than quick judgment. Sixth, understand that growing up involves accepting complexity rather than escaping it. Seventh, recognize the value of genuine human connection. Another practical lesson is emotional honesty. Many people hide confusion or sadness behind humor, sarcasm, performance, or detachment. The novel encourages greater awareness of emotional reality beneath surface behavior. The final summary of The Catcher in the Rye is this: growing up is painful because innocence fades, identity becomes uncertain, and the world reveals complexity and hypocrisy. Yet, emotional sensitivity itself is not weakness. Holden's pain comes partly from caring deeply in a world that often feels emotionally disconnected. In the end, Salinger suggests that maturity does not mean becoming cold or cynical. True growth may involve learning how to preserve empathy, honesty, and humanity even after innocence is gone.